What's up, guys? Here with another announcement. On Saturday, June 22nd, we'll be going to Saudi Arabia. Our first fight in the kingdom will be a fight night that will air live and free on ABC. And the main event will be
Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker. Things were getting stale. Things were getting boring. I haven't had an announcement in ages, and Dana White decides to announce a bomb fight night in Saudi Arabia. It's going down. My goodness, I'm happy to see that Dana White announced Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker last night. An incredible stylistic matchup. Number one contenders fight as well. That's the first fight that I'm going to break down in this video, but get a load of these. Sergei Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. Talk about a beautiful stylistic matchup. Two Russians going at it. In the main event, a finish is guaranteed. Ihor Potieria versus Shara the Bullet. That's an amazing stylistic matchup as well. Maybe not the name I would have wanted to face Shara the Bullet. I would have wanted maybe a bigger name, but either way, it's only a second UFC fight. It's better than giving him a number one contender all of a sudden, as they tend to do with people like Shara the Bullet. We also have Big Tubby. People are talking about Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. What about KG? That's the big story. That's what the majority of the breakdown, I'm just joking. That's not the majority of the breakdown, but Kelvin Gastelum's also back, and he's going to fight another welterweight. And it's going to be tough. He's fighting D-Rod, old head D-Rod. And of course, we have Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezedemir. I love that matchup. That's a perfect stylistic matchup. It should be fun too. And the UFC's just been announcing great fights this week as well. I mean, we've got Lerone Murphy versus Edson Barboza. We thought that we were going to see Jailton Almeida and Alexander Volkov, but I'm happy that they canceled that fight and instead gave the Volkov fight to Sergei Pavlovich because, like, at the end of the day, there was a great chance that Almeida would have just stunk it up. But let's get into Khamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whittaker. I love this fight. I'm sure you guys do as well. I think it makes sense for a number one contenders fight. And I'm not confident in my prediction, but I will just give it to you guys early and then I'll kind of break it down. I think Robert Whittaker is going to sting Khamzat Chimaev up and beat his ass in the second and third round. I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to lose this fight, okay? Now, it's close, and I can see Khamzat's path to victory. I can see how he can slow things down in the second and third round. When I say slow things down, we talk about Khamzat Chimaev, and we think of the guy that's charging out of the gate, sprinting from the get-go. Well, that all comes crashing down. Also, I mean, it's just time to admit it. Khamzat Chimaev is not just running through elite fighters like we thought he was going to do back in the day. I mean, every single fight he's had with someone that's elite, it's been tooth and nail, fighting for his life. You know, I mean, it could have gone this way, could have gone that way. So, listen, the first thing I thought of when I saw this announcement was I got to rewatch Robert Whittaker's fight with Yoel Romero. The first fight where the legendary takedown defense myth, not a myth, but the legend of Whittaker's takedown defense really started to catch fire. It looked phenomenal in that fight. It looked really good, but it's already clear that, I mean, listen, Yoel Romero was a phenomenal wrestler. He was an Olympic caliber wrestler, but he doesn't have the best ability to control people on the ground. He doesn't have a submission game. So there was always this idea that Yoel, even though he could take anyone down, he had a hard time really doing a lot of stuff with it at the highest level. Even though Yoel is still a pretty decent grappler, still been able to TKO people on the ground. But my point is, Khamzat's a bigger threat on the mat. And Khamzat, listen, he's going to take Whittaker down. If you don't think he's taking Whittaker down, you got to think twice about that because Khamzat is a massive human. He's big for the middleweight division too. Robert Whittaker, even though he's been at middleweight for years, he is, I think, a smaller guy than Khamzat Chimaev. You know, Whittaker talks about himself being 220 pounds in the offseason. I don't know how the fuck that's possible, but I guess it's all in the legs because his upper body, I mean, he kind of looks like a big tubby version of Kelvin Gastelum at middleweight. I'm not even going to lie. He's shredded, he's lean, but he has like an awkward upper body build. He carries a lot of his weight in his legs, which is great for takedown defense. But the point that I'm making is Khamzat is not going to be up against the biggest middleweight that's a total brick wall just physically. Whittaker's a brick wall in the sense that he's got a great scramble. He can whip up some good old scramble eggs. And he's got great hips for stuffing takedowns. And we saw that in the Yoel Romero fight. Whittaker's sprawl is amazing. His takedown defense technique is phenomenal. But I think because Khamzat's so technical when it comes to finding good trips, and he's really good at getting people down with body locks and chaining takedowns together and then getting the back, once he has your back, you're probably in that position for quite some time. Whereas Yoel Romero is not really going to get the back. Whittaker was only 26 when he fought Yoel Romero the first time. And why is that relevant? Well, I've talked about this before with Adesanya when he was fighting Pereira. The further you are removed from your original sport, for Izzy, it was kickboxing, the more that original skill is going to deteriorate. I mean, that's just kind of obvious. I was saying, like, Alex Pereira is not that far removed from his kickboxing days when he was a glory kickboxing champion, and I think he's going to be able to outstrike Izzy, and he was able to do that. All right, Izzy, I think it's possible that your skills can deteriorate in one realm if you start adding on grappling and all these other things. And for Whittaker, some of you guys may not know this if you haven't really been watching the sport for a long time, but Whittaker used to compete at a very high level in wrestling. I mean, I think he almost made it to the Olympic Games. He didn't make it, but he almost got to that level. And that was obviously in his early 20s. And then he fought Yoel Romero in his early 20s. Well, 26, which is pretty fucking nuts if you think about how young he was. Yoel was 40. But it's been a minute since Whittaker's fought someone that's going to shoot takedowns as a plan A. That is a very physical presence in the octagon. And because he's been fighting guys like Vettori and Izzy and most recently Big Paulo Costa, he's not really had to deal with a high-level grappler who's a monster when it comes to taking people down. Khamzat can take anyone down. All right, his technique and his strength is good enough to take anyone down. We saw that in the Kamaru Usman fight. Fair enough, Usman didn't have a full training camp, but he still is Kamaru. His skills just don't vanish. He's still training in the offseason, and he couldn't do anything to stuff the takedown. Okay, now in the second and third round, he started to stuff more of them, but he still got taken down at the end of it. The difference between Kamaru Usman and Robert Whittaker is that once it hits the mat, Kamaru is no jiu-jitsu expert. He's not great on his back. He's not got the best submission defense, even though he did fend off the submissions, and that's another reason why I'm picking Whittaker. Let me just say this. Like, the days of me thinking Khamzat's just going to finish everyone in the first round is over. I think he's a tough out in the first, meaning like he's probably going to win the first against Whittaker. He's probably going to run across the octagon, take him down, chain together a bunch of takedowns until he has the back. But I think Whittaker can survive that moment. And I think that all the energy that Khamzat's going to expend, it's going to lead him to gas out in the second and third. I mean, he had absolutely nothing. I just watched that fight. The commentators, and myself included, were baffled by the drop-off of volume and intensity and aggression from this guy. He's a totally different fighter. You even see it in the takedowns themselves. He takes down Usman at the end of the second, at the end of the third, and there's no ground and pound. There's no submission attempts. When we think of Khamzat Chimaev, we think of a guy that's ferocious on the ground, that's unstoppable looking for finishes, landing good shots, and he wasn't able to do anything like that. And I think that if he has a more reserved approach to a fight with Robert Whittaker, and we know Whittaker's a guy that likes to move around a lot, who also has great takedown defense, I think that that is better for Whittaker. Because the thing is, like, if the takedowns are few and far in between for Khamzat and he's more patient, then I think that lets Whittaker get in the zone a little bit more, and it allows him to have all of his strength necessary to stuff every single takedown that comes in his direction. Whereas I think Khamzat's best way to really get Whittaker out of there on the ground is to kind of bulldoze him to the mat in the first round, put everything into it, and try to get him out of there. And if he doesn't do that, well, he's going to gas out. If he's more reserved, I think it gives him a better chance to chin Robert Whittaker. That's also something that people need to bring up. We know Whittaker doesn't have the best chin. I don't want to hear nothing about the Paulo Costa spinning back kick. What are you saying? You know, he ate that spinning back kick. Dude, Whittaker's never had a great chin to begin with. That's actually more of a testament to the fact that Costa don't have any pop. And sure, he took a monstrous shot. He was braced for it. It was a good, solid chin moment for Whittaker, but let's not pretend that this guy has a great chin. Khamzat Chimaev has KO power early on in his fights, and I think he could maybe knock Whittaker out if he is patient as well. But I'm just going to have to go with Whittaker, man. He's one of the few middleweights that I can trust to have a really good scramble to, you know, once he starts getting into a training camp that's heavily focused on takedown defense, I think it's going to come back to him quite easily because he used to do it back in the day, and it's just kind of natural for him as well. And I also think that when it comes to the level of striking, sometimes I do worry about the middleweights that are fighting the welterweights that move up because there's a skill gap that we always see. I mean, look at Michel Pereira. He's going to decision after decision after decision, and then he moves up a weight class and he's smoking everyone in the first round. And the guys that he's smoking are like decent middleweights. Whittaker, former welterweight, very fast. I mean, his speed is one of his strongest attributes, if not his strongest attribute. If there's a guy that I trust to hold his own when it comes to the whole skill discrepancy, I think that he can hold his own when it comes to the speed and technique on the feet. And I think he's a better striker than Khamzat Chimaev. And I think that because Khamzat Chimaev is probably going to come out of the gates fast and hard early, I think he's going to slow down, whereas Whittaker's not. And I think Whittaker's just going to pick him apart and catch Khamzat coming in and stomp on his knees and stuff the takedowns and just kind of piece him up a little bit. So I will be going with Whittaker by decision in this one. Khamzat just didn't look good in the Usman fight. Second round, third round, he had a whole fucking year to prepare for that shit, and he gassed out. I mean, how do you explain gassing out after 5 minutes when you've had an entire year to get ready for a whole new weight class? There's no excuse. I don't care about the break in his hand thing. People break their hands in a fight. He didn't go into that fight with a broken hand. He broke his hand early on. Okay, big whoop. Throw a kick. All right, throw the other hand. We didn't really see a whole lot of that until the third round. And guess what? When we saw him letting his hands go in the third round, that was because Usman was forcing him to let his hands go. And Usman was getting the better of him in those exchanges. And I think Whittaker's a much more technical striker than Kamaru Usman. He might be a different striker. Usman is a guy that can really do well at putting pressure on you and sticking behind the long 1-2s and the good jab. And Whittaker doesn't really do that. But I think Whittaker can catch Khamzat coming in multiple times. And I think we're about to see a really good version of him. Because the last fight that we saw from Whittaker was a stand-up battle for the most part. And I just saw him like trying to be Mr. Tough Guy in the center of the cage to prove a point against Paulo Costa, where he wasn't really moving around a whole lot. He wasn't light on his feet. He was kind of just sitting there in the pocket the whole time. And of course, you don't really have to respect the power of Paulo Costa that much. I think against a guy like Khamzat, who is a lot more powerful, who Whittaker knows is going to be shooting takedowns, that's going to force him to keep a good amount of distance early on in the fight. And I think when Whittaker's fighting with distance first in his mind, I think that's when he's at his best. So I'm going to go with Whittaker. Khamzat's going to, in my opinion, slow down in the second and third. He's not going to be able to get the takedowns as easily. I think Whittaker's going to survive the onslaught. And I just think Whittaker's going to outstrike him. And I think the takedown defense is going to improve as the fight progresses, as he gets warmed up. But let's get on to the next fight. Sergei Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. I'm going to go with Sergei Pavlovich to KO Alexander Volkov. I love this fight, and I think it's possible for Volkov to frustrate Sergei Pavlovich because I think his striking has been improving. He looks like he hits really hard, but he doesn't have KO power, which is the reason why I'm ultimately picking against him, right? Like, he's such a big dude. He's like 265 when he weighs in. So he's probably like 275 in the cage. I mean, no matter what, if that guy has good technique, if he's hitting you, it's going to hurt. But he's not laying guys out with his 1-2s. I mean, he was hitting Tai Tuivasa with the kitchen sink, and not once did he drop him. And I know he's gotten some body shot TKOs, and he was able to get Romanov out of there kind of early, somewhat with the body shots as well. We saw him body kick TKO, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, and a couple of other guys as well. The last guy he's put out with his hands is Alistair Overeem, who is an old head who does not have the chin of Sergei Pavlovich. I think that Volkov's going to be outstriking Sergei, and I think he's going to be hitting him with a lot of strikes early, but I just don't think anything is going to affect him that much. And as soon as you get clipped clean from Sergei Pavlovich, I mean, you're going to get rocked. And as soon as you're rocked by Sergei, he's coming in there big slugging at the hips. That's the thing. People talk about Sergei Pavlovich as like this super technical boxer. He's a wild man slugger. And that's fine because once he hurts you, he's like Dustin Poirier. He gets on you right away and you're basically toast. I think it's going to be easier to hit Volkov than it was Aspinall, right? Especially because Sergei has such long arms as well. Volkov is a little bit more rooted into the ground, a little bit more of a plodster. He's like a skyscraper plodster. And I think that he is going to have a really good look early on, but it's only a matter of time before Sergei Pavlovich catches him with a big bomb, maybe his lead hand, maybe like the lead hook. And I just think he's going to rock Volkov and put him out, TKO him up against the fence when Volkov's shelling up. That's my official pick because, again, you look at the way Sergei Pavlovich is putting out Tai Tuivasa, and this is before Tai even fought Volkov. I mean, the first exchange, Tai Tuivasa's flying across the octagon. Same thing with Derek Lewis. Like, yeah, he got knocked out by Tom Aspinall, and he's looking less scary because of it, but Tom Aspinall's a different beast. Tom Aspinall is fast twitch, he's explosive, and one right hand he lands on you, and that's the end of the fight. I don't see the same ability from Volkov. Volkov's the guy that needs accumulative damage to be able to find a finish. And yeah, I don't think he's going to have that much time in this one. I don't think it's going to get into the third round. I don't think it's going to get into the latter half of the second. So I will be picking Sergei Pavlovich to knock out Alexander Volkov. I love this fight, though. It should be a banger. Feel a little bit bad for Volkov because I think that Almeida, in a way, was an easier fight. But I still think he would have lost to Almeida. It was just easier in the sense that he's probably not going to get KO'd. And if he can keep it standing, he definitely could hurt Almeida. Sergey's so durable. So I don't think he's going to get him out of there. On to the next one, though. Shara the Bullet versus Ihor Potieria. I got to go with Shara the Bullet. Ihor Potieria is just not that great, man. And he's had a really rough go in the UFC. He's been getting smoked in a lot of his fights. I think I picked against him in his last one. I forget the guy that he fought, some Polish guy that was making his debut. And I bought into the whole, these prospects from Poland are so well-rounded, and they're all like Mateusz Gamrots. And they've got like, you know, all the bases covered, decent striking, decent grappling. And this guy just was totally mid. Ihor Potieria's got some really crisp striking, but it looks crisp against the lowest levels of competition in the UFC. And he didn't even look that great in his last fight. So I'm going to go with Shara the Bullet. Even though he got taken down against Bruno Silva, and there's a chance he gets taken down here, his takedown defense is improving rapidly, most likely, because he's not doing kickboxing and Muay Thai anymore. It's just all MMA. And say what you want about this guy. He might not be a future world champion, but he's got amazing striking. He has some of the best kicks in MMA. They may not be as powerful as other guys. Like, I think that his body kicks are solid, but they're not the most powerful body kicks. But he kicks like a boxer boxes, man. Like, the output that he has with his kicks and the versatility and the variety of strikes or different angles he can catch you with or different types of kicks he has is like that of a boxer with all the combinations and different strikes a boxer can hit you with. I have to go with Shara the Bullet. Dude's a beast. If you haven't rewatched his fight with Bruno Silva, you'll really be impressed. And he impressed me quite a bit. I didn't expect him to look as good as he did. So I think he's just going to easily outstrike Ihor Potieria, maybe even knock his ass out if he catches Ihor on the chin. We also have Johnny Walker versus Alexander, motherfucker! Volkov and Volkan on the same card is not fair, okay? This is fucking annoying. Volkov and Volkan, dude, these guys are the biggest nightmare to have on the same card to read off in the same video. No time Oezdemir, goddammit. Okay? I think Volkan Oezedemir is going to beat Johnny Walker's ass. I think he's going to knock his ass out. Listen, it's one thing if you got Yuri Prohaska in there with no time Oezdemir, and Yuri Prohaska's, he's wild like Johnny Walker, but he's got much better boxing, and he's a smarter fighter. He's got better technique. It really just boils down to this. Johnny Walker's technique is just not that good. He doesn't have great boxing. We saw what happened in the Magomed and Goliath fight. Of course, Volkan is not as good as Magomed and Goliath, but he at least went to decision with Magomed, right? Volkan's at least a tough out. He at least finished Bogdan. Like Volkan, I'm just going to call him Oezdemir. Volkan Oezdemir is at least finishing all the guys Walker's putting away. Like anyone Walker's finished, I'm pretty sure Volkan Oezdemir can finish as well. Right? Walker beats Paul Craig. Volkan beats Paul Craig too. Maybe not by finish, but he still beats him. I think they're on a rather similar level. And I could see Walker. Of course, Walker can knock anyone out. He's got dynamite in every single limb that he has. But I just think he's a little bit too wild. And Volkan Oezdemir's basics, the big ugly low kicks and the big ugly combinations. I say big ugly because, you know, he's not flashy. He's not got finesse. You know what you get. You know what you get. You can't get upset with Volkan Oezdemir. He's got very bread and butter strikes. But old reliable works in the light heavyweight division. Old reliable won Jan Blachowicz the belt. So I'm going to go with Volkan Oezdemir. I think that he's smart enough to be able to land a big bomb on the chin of Johnny Walker, who just got knocked out again, man. Let's not act like those KOs don't add up. It's one thing for Pavlovich to get knocked out in the very beginning of his career. All right. And then, he's fighting Volkov. All right. His chin's not gone. What is this? Knockout number 10 for Johnny Walker? He took at least 4 or 5 of them in one of his fights back in the day. Literally, he got knocked out like 5 times in one of his fights. And now he's been knocked out by Magomed. He's been knocked out by Anderson. He's been KO'd by who else? Jamal Hill. He's been knocked out a bunch of times, man. I think Volkan's going to plant a big bomb on his chin. Just a nice solid bomb. Maybe a nice ugly right hand on him. So I'm going to go with Volkan no time Oezdemir. Big Tubby Kelvin Gastelum versus D-Rod, okay? I'm going to go with Daniel Rodriguez. Kelvin Gastelum, fat middleweight, moving down. And listen, I think that at a certain point in time, it becomes a little bit too late to move down and to have success in the welterweight division. I think one of the biggest gaps of skill that we can see is middleweight and welterweight. And Kelvin's in his early to mid 30s at this point, and I think that the cat's out the bag. We know who he is. He's not getting a whole lot better, and he's used to fighting at middleweight size. The weight cut, it's not going to be as good, and I just think D-Rod's used to fighting faster guys. And even though D-Rod got put out by Ian Gary, he still has better boxing than Kelvin Gastelum. Like, I know Kelvin Gastelum, when he gets in the pocket, is pretty dangerous and he can look good against Chris Curtis. But again, Chris Curtis, I don't think Chris Curtis makes it to the same level that D-Rod did at welterweight. And I know D-Rod's getting older, but my point is he's got great boxing. He's got a long reach. And KG's probably not shooting any takedowns. I think Daniel Rodriguez is going to win the decision here over KG. I think KG's going to disappoint us a little bit, guys. I just cannot trust a middleweight, a failed middleweight, going down to fight an old, crafty vet in Daniel Rodriguez, who has tons of experience. I think he said he has like 300 fights, 250 of them are in prison. So he's got a lot of experience, man. I'm going to go with D-Rod, bro. I'm going to go with D-Rod. When in doubt, pick the welterweight to beat the former middleweight, okay? Especially when they have a similar style when it comes to, you know, they're both going to strike, they're both going to box for the most part. The idea of Kelvin Gastelum and his wrestling, it's long gone, okay? So, amazing card. And I also think that the UFC is going to Perth, Australia. They're thinking of making Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis. I like the fact that they're going to Perth. I'm sure they're going to stack that card as well. Maybe they'll have Volk on it. Dude, let's do Volk versus Aljamain as a co-main event. Fuck yeah. Let's do Volkanovski on the same card as Izzy, like the good old days. That'll bring me back to like 2021, 2022, man. Let's give us a card like that. Izzy and Volk on the same one. It is a little bit annoying that Adesanya is getting a title shot. I mean, what? The guy's 500. We're going to give him a title shot after every single win. Win one, lose one in a title, get the title back. It's like, come on. Enough of the immediate rematches. Even though this is not a rematch, it's just like immediate title opportunities for Adesanya. The middleweight division is stacked, and we have Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev that are about to fight. I get it. If Whittaker wins, it's less appealing to make that rematch. But then if Whittaker wins, just do the Strickland fight. If Khamzat wins, well, that's a better contender than Adesanya because he's at least earning it against Robert Whittaker. A little bit annoying, but it's fine. This is still a really good fight. It's still going to be a fun build-up. And I'd probably pick Dricus du Plessis. I don't know what that means for Sean Strickland. I guess Strickland and Whittaker are going to fight if Khamzat wins. And if Khamzat wins, he'll just sit out and fight the winner of DDP and Izzy. But yeah, I guess it's not good for Sean Strickland. He's the odd man out in this situation because we've got a number one contenders fight. And then we have Izzy swooping in for that immediate title opportunity like he always gets. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Until next time.